Right, good morning. Welcome to the Anxiety Crusher. Stopping the anxiety spiral before it begins. This is my first day back after a week of unexpected absence. Just a bit of an emergency popped up, but I'm back on track. And it's a good example of why we have to have that resilience when we're doing something new, because there's always something different that's going to show up. And some of the things you need contingency plans for, some of the things you need a plan B, and other things you just take it in stride and move on. But this is also why it's good to have partners and you're working with other people, etc. But that's not what today is about. So last week, let's see, the Friday was, I would say, a major breakthrough in terms of the 7-step reset and introducing it. So the 7-step reset, as I've said several times, is to put it in layman terms what we already know from a neuroscience standpoint, and especially emotional intelligence, because this is under the umbrella of dynamic leadership. And dynamic leadership is just as it suggests, dynamic. It's not something special. Most of the things that you're going to learn in dynamic leadership are already being applied at some level. You might apply them yourself. What's different, we always say the hard stuff is easy, the soft stuff is hard, meaning the analytics or KPIs and looking at numerical evaluations, etc., that part is easy. It's the soft skills, moving people along, moving people from where they are to where they want to be. That's what's hard. And I also talk about it being more like a one-to-one. Even though you might be leading a team of 8 people, your real leadership is one-to-one, because you're having to meet people where they are and move them along. And eventually you're going to have them moving as a unit, but getting them to be acting as that unit is sometimes a one-on-one conversation. You see that happening with sports teams. A great team that works really well together, they weren't always like that. The coach is spending individual time with each player to get them to understand where they should be and why. And it's not necessarily needed to be understood by somebody else, right? It's what's needed for that person. So what we're doing now, what I want to do today is look at a different way of the 7 phases. So we talked about the 7 phases of the 1-second model. And if I go back to this, to the 7-step reset, this is where it all happens. This obviously is preventive, and we need these strengths. We need to be strong here. But if you're going to make changes, it's here and it's here. The majority of people attempt to make changes here. When you think about changing habits, when you think about new behavior, transforming, or whatever, we tend to be looking here after the stimulus. But remember, this is our state of being, and if we have 33,000 stimulus response cycles a day, we're going through this thing constantly. And whether or not we get back on track to an even keel before the next stimulus, that makes a big difference. So you have your beliefs, neuroplasticity, priming, mindset, and physiology here. That's learned, and this is development. So we have to keep developing here, because that does create more than an artificial ceiling. It's almost like a real ceiling for us. If we don't have the skills necessary to cope, that's going to be a limit. But I would say your artificial limits come into play well before these real limits come into play. But we want to keep moving that up. And the other thing we have to do is get faster at getting back to even keel, getting back to adaptability. And this is where that high heart rate variability comes into play. So we can keep working on this, but at the end of the day, it's this 1 second, it's the 7 phases of this 1 second that determine whether or not you're going to move forward or stay the same. And I want to break this down a little bit more, because like I've said, everything is fractal. So if prevention is better in the 7-step process, guess what? Prevention is also better in this 1 second moment. This 1 second that represents the conditioned reaction cycle, which is happening, and it's well more than 33,000 times a day, because there's micro stimulus response cycles that are happening multiple times a second. So now I'll go back to this diagram, and we have the 1 second, right, from here going across. And if I look at it from another perspective, I have that other one? I guess not. This part here, the beginning of it, is the neuron network. Into about here is the network of neurons, aka subconscious, and then from here on it's conscious. So there's a transition that happens that goes from impulse signal, right, a signal going through the neural pathways, which is energy. It transitions into thought that can be perceived by the conscious mind. So thought is a form of energy. What's going through the neurons is a form of energy, but they're not the same. But it transitions it into something that can be perceived by the conscious mind. This, to me, is where your breakthrough understanding comes from. If you do nothing else, I would say to work on getting to the point where you can tell the clear difference between subconscious impulses, subconscious reactions, subconscious inputs versus conscious mind thinking. Conscious mind thinking is real. Without you having that discernment, you will give the same level of truth to subconscious inputs as you will to conscious thought. And that's not a good idea, especially if you're doing something new, which for most of us, we're going to be living in that world of doing something new that we haven't done before for most of our lives now, because of just the way technology is going and artificial intelligence. And in the United States, we've even gotten to the point where they're saying states can't regulate artificial intelligence, which means, in other words, that they're not allowed to regulate artificial intelligence. If we get into a place where governments are not allowing regulation of artificial intelligence, we're basically handing over the keys to the castle to the bad guys, because artificial intelligence can be used, it's not good or bad, right, but it can be used for ill will. And because it's so fast and so quick, it can stay ahead of us. And if we are reactive, then you're already cooked. So we're going to be involved in this, doing something new constantly. And what I would argue is that by learning to discern the difference. Now, what do I mean? If you've tried any meditation, I'll give you a couple of different examples. If you've tried meditation, you've experienced this, and the idea is you want to pull yourself gently back, pull your consciousness gently back. So what we have is the present moment. We have the conscious mind is clear. Consciousness is pure. That's a given. And our mind is also here and present. So we don't have any regrets of the past or anxiety of the future. So our thoughts are clear, our mind is clear, and we're present consciously. We're aware that we're aware that we're aware, and we're conscious. When you're meditating, especially in the beginning of a meditation session or when you first start meditating, you're constantly being bombarded. It's like you sit down and, oh, did I turn the lights off? Should I do this? Oh, the heat is up too high. The air conditioner is up too high. Do I need to call somebody? Should I send that email? I'm going to be out for 15 minutes. And it's boom, boom, boom. That's a great example of the subconscious associations coming in. I would argue most of those are coming from the subconscious. One, they're coming up with the speed, and two, they're reactive. It's certainly not a thought, because your conscious thought, you're attempting to meditate, so you're not going to be consciously thinking about those things, at least not generating them. So this is the subconscious just generating all these impulses or inputs, associations. And what you're doing is gently pulling it back. Not now. Not now, however you do it, right? Not now. So that's one example. Another example is if you ever get into something that has to do with the flow state. So let's say you're hiking and you're moving along and you've got some things going on in your mind that you don't want to deal with or whatever, and you're struggling with, you're trying to keep quiet, and then all of a sudden you get to a technical area and you've got to scramble over some rocks and there's some danger involved. Your subconscious shuts down completely because it's focused on paying attention to where you put your hands, where you put your feet. Best practices for scrambling. You look at how slippery is this surface. and your subconscious chatter shuts down completely. I ride a one wheel. It looks like a skateboard on a big go-kart wheel. Does the same thing. When I ride that one wheel, if I'm on it for, say, 45 minutes, my subconscious is completely shut down because it's so easy for the one wheel to trip over a bump or especially depressions, because you can't see depressions. And you get hurt pretty bad because it kind of nosedives and you slam down. So the subconscious has learned the hard way that I got to look for every single imperfection, and it's constantly. And I'll tell you, for me anyway, the times that I have fallen, if I shouldn't have fallen, if I'm out on grass or doing some stunts or tricks, whatever, falling's okay there because you're doing something new or different. But when I fall and I'm not expecting to, it's typically because I'm on a familiar road or familiar path, and that familiar path has something different on it. I don't know if that makes sense, but another way to look at it is if I've been on a familiar path over and over and over, and then I take a slight deviation, I go around a different way, and I hit a depression over there that I didn't see, and that's because the subconscious is checked out, right? The subconscious thinks, oh, I know this place, I'm good here, and it's ready to go back into its default mode. So there's a lot of ways. I think, again, another way to tell quickly if it's the subconscious or the conscious is how fast it comes. If you're getting impulses right away, within a quarter of a second, by definition, you know that's coming from the subconscious. You can go back to this diagram and you can look. We're talking about from here, these first two, actually first three, the pre-part, which you're not aware of, then the first quarter second, the second quarter second. If it's coming up here, chances are it's the subconscious. This is when the conscious mind starts to come into play. And eventually you'll actually notice that thought has a different signature than a subconscious impulse. And that's what we want to get to, because it makes it easier to ignore it. I've said on a couple of these talks that I have gotten to the point where I know I'm not having 33,000 stimulus response cycles in a day. I know I'm probably way under 15,000, and it's part of it is because I'm ignoring the stimulus. Part of it is because I'm focused so much in another area. So one way to think about it, just using it as an example, if I'm meditating, I'm not having these stimulus response cycles. Now, I don't have to be meditating, but I could be in a conscious state. I could be in a present moment state. So I'm not thinking about the past. I'm not thinking about the future. And by being in that present moment state, I'm just avoiding some of the stimulus. You could look at it in many different ways, but I'm telling you, I'm way below 33,000, or probably below 15,000. Not that I could have counted them anyway. And I don't even see ads. I don't can't even remember them. I'm online, so I know they're going past, but I'm not acknowledging them. That's because the reticular activating system has been reprogrammed. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is getting a handle on this one second model. And what we're going to do is, we talked about this on Friday, the pre-sensing, pre-thinking. This is the prediction part. It's the pre-listening. It's before the stimulus even happens. The stimulus happens right here. This is a T-minus 100. T-minus 100 milliseconds is the pre-listening part, because it's preparing you for whatever may come. So if you're on a dark street in a strange city, it's preparing you for one thing. If you're in a busy traffic, in driving or riding a bicycle in busy traffic, it's preparing you for something different. If you walk into a meeting late, it's preparing you for something different. So whatever it is, it's preparing you for something contextually aligned with where you are. And I said on Friday that you can create a template here. Then I also said that you can create a template here in that template here, I talked about the example of, like, rather than just have the subconscious hand off to you the reaction, you can have it hand off something like an objective, clear definition of the problem, or an objective, possible next steps. If it has to do with a monetary problem, it could be, I want a no-cost solution, a low-cost solution, and an ideal solution. You could literally create templates to hand it off like that. So I want to spend time talking about that because it's a bridge towards the ultimate. And I think for me, I would suggest that one of those ultimate outcomes would be that you no longer have to go through a process to change a habit. You can just decide. Now, I'm not there at 100%, but I'm very much at the point where I make a decision and it's done. I don't have to deal, one, because I understand this and I'm applying it and I'm not getting tripped up by the things. So if you change your pre-listening, guess what? You're going to change your reaction to the stimulus. It's just, you're tapping into a different set of conditioning. Remember we talked about that path of least resistance, that the first reaction is along the path of least resistance. But if you use implementation intentions, then it's no longer you're going to use that path of least resistance. The positivity exercise. We shift from a subconscious system that's biased towards looking for risks and assuming things are threats. You're moving into something that's looking at them as neutral or even positive. So literally you go from 80% likely threat to only 20% likely threat in terms of your, and this is at the program, the subconscious conditioned level. So here's what I'll do now. We're going to create an example of templates and then apply those templates to real world examples. I was looking for a way to describe clearly what a template is, and so if you think about, you've got a paradigm, and then within that paradigm you have a model of the world, and then that model of the world you'll have your templates. So your templates organize, or a way to organize information for you, and then from there you have your decisions or behaviors, your actions. So the template is sitting between your model of the world and the actions that you intend to take. Because it's happening so fast at the subconscious level, most people don't even realize that there's a template step, and they attempt to correct things, but they're correcting them post-template. Pre-template, things are moving slowly. There's no explosiveness, there's no danger, there's no threat. Once you're triggered, you're way beyond the template and you're flying along. So changing the primary question from, which is something like, am I safe, changing it to what's needed now, or what else is going on, or what else could it be, or what's my objective, or how does this align, having some kind of a primary question that doesn't take you down a path of questioning. So you don't want to be on your heels. Think about it like that. In the pre-listening stage, you don't want to be on your heels. You want to be on the balls of your feet. You want to be in an athletic stance, using physiology as an example. But mentally, you can be there too. You want to be alert, positive energy. And then when things are gone, when everything is back to normal, you can relax. But when you're in that moment as a leader, when you're presenting something, or when you're on the floor as a leader, whatever, you want to be on the balls of your feet. You don't want to be on your heels. And that's a way to have that primary question. What can I take advantage of? Where's my leverage points? What's good for me to take leverage right now? What are some of the risks that are emerging? What's a potential risk I can stop now? And then you have your assembly phase. And this is where you have your heuristics and like cognitive biases come into play. The priming is going to have a big play in here. But remember, that's because the stimulus has already happened. Now that the stimulus happened already, this is the initial detection. Initial detection of what's going on. So the stimulus happened, and that initial detection leads to meaning. This is the rapid appraisal, but let's just call it meaning. So now the meaning is assigned. And once the meaning is assigned, you're done, right? It's already off and running because this leads to a reaction and handoff to the conscious mind. So that reaction is the handoff to the conscious mind. And if it comes in so strong in life and death, fight or flight, then the conscious mind is not likely going to take a pause for a choice, and that's where we get that next problem of people being triggered. So we want to make sure that we have a pause in here. So this is an opportunity for a template, and this is an opportunity for a template. And I would say there's some correlation or some corroboration between the two, because if you're a leader and you're interacting with a difficult situation, you want to be asking yourself the right primary question, but then as inputs come in, you also want them to be appropriate for the stimulus that's coming and your objective. So I'm going to use this example. It's not going to be a easily, well, let me just go for it. What I was looking for was an example that everyone could understand, which is good, and I'll go there next. But to me, the best example, whether you've done performance driving or not, you may have driven in the snow. Most people who've been driving any number of years has experienced what a fishtail feels like. Now they have traction control and all that, so it's less obvious. But let's say that we have your road. Now, in performance driving, you don't make your time on the turn itself. You make your time by lengthening the straightaway. Right? We want to have a long straightaway for the next one. And at that next turn, depending on what kind of a turn it is, you're either going to lengthen the straightaway by braking late, but the majority of the time, racers are lengthening the straightaway by positioning the car so they're able to get on the gas earlier. So we have a car coming across here. The car is going through the turn. And then it wants to get on the gas. But if it gets on the gas, it's going, the rear end is going to come around, especially if it's a rear-wheel drive car. So if it gets on the gas, the rear end comes around, and now you're going like this. Now you're drifting. Right? So the car's trying to go this way, but you're burning up smoke here, you're burning up tires here because the car is drifting and the forces are going this way. Now in drifting, that's what they want. But in performance driving and racing, you don't want that. In performance driving, you want the car to be aligned, but actually what you do to get it aligned, you have it slightly in this attitude here. Intentionally, but you're tracking out. So instead of allowing the drift to go out, you're having the forces go this way. Because you precede the drift, and I could draw this a little bit less angle because it's similar to that one. But it's called track out. So using a regular example, the car is going to spin. The car spins. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep tracking out so there's alignment of the forces. So you're turning the steering wheel slightly into the direction, the same way you would to stop a skid, but you're doing it preemptively. You know you're getting on the gas, and as you get on the gas, you're going to start loading the outside wheels a little bit by turning the steering wheel into the what would be the skid, but you're doing it before. So in actuality, the car looks like this. The car doesn't look like it's spinning at all. But as the driver, you know that you are holding that skid because you're tracking out. You're literally taking that car and you're forcing it to stay in alignment with the forces. It's called track out. There are other examples, but the reason why this one is so good and it fits in that half second, because in this half second, prevention matters. Once you get this thing spun, it's too late, and you lose all that time. So if you're racing, if you drift a car in a race, there's no way a car that's drifting is going to beat a car that's doing tracking out, because the forces are just getting burned up. It's the same way in dealing with this 1 second, the first quarter, the pre-listening, the initial detection, and the rapid appraisal. This the same way prevention works with track out is going to work there. Here's why this is important. We need to be in tune with ourselves. That's why I said it's important to know the difference between subconscious chatter versus conscious mind thoughts. We need to know when we're shifting inside, because if you feel that shift coming in the past I've talked about, and this is a good solution, to back off, right? If you're leading somebody else, or if you're doing something, you're pushing yourself, and you're starting to feel that you want to argue and debate, and you feel that energy comes in, you can back off. But there's another way you can do it as well. You can track out. You can just start, you know what, let me just take some of the pressure off of that spin and start turning the wheel this way a little bit. It's tracking out, where now you're riding that wave. You're riding that energy wave. The more technical, more sophisticated way of negotiating a turn. A new driver is going to spin out. A new driver is just going to wait for the car to spin, and then they're going to catch it. But the spin has already happened. They've already lost time. The professional race driver, the champion, will be tracking out all the time. And in fact, some of your best racers literally are sliding the tires the entire time because they're just on that edge. If you ever go to a racetrack, you'll watch, and you go in the pits, you'll see that there's little balls of rubber all over the place. And that's because the tires are tearing. They're constantly tearing against the asphalt, which is where traction comes from. It's the tearing. And that tearing is because the drivers are always on the edge of sliding. The pros, the top three, I would say the top 5 in amateur racing, maybe top 10 in amateur racing, are going to be spinning those at the edge, at the verge of spinning the tires. Motorcycle racing is even more so, that the winners are spinning the tires the whole time. But again, the point is not about racing. The point is about the leaning into that thing a little bit, taking off some of the pressure and putting it in a different way. So if that has to do with sales, what you might do is, you're feeling the pressure, the tension coming from the prospect, you're going to address it. You're going to release the pressure valve. You're going to let the prospect talk about some of the things that are coming up for them. That's where I like the statement. What's coming up for you on that, right? It gives them a chance to let off some pressure rather than push against it. The intuitive thing is to just keep pushing against it. But what you want to do is let that pressure relief, and then you also get information. As a leader, the same thing. If you're presenting something and you're seeing people make facial expressions, and you can see they're not happy about it, they're shaking their head, oh, come on, putting their pen down, that you're already too late. Right? That spin has already started. What you want to do is catch what goes on before that, and just, hey, let's take a break here and have some. First, I want to hear from the people who think that there might be something I'm missing. Let me hear from those folks first. Or what are some of the concerns? I've talked about the good stuff from this, but what are some of the current concerns that are coming up from you? And there's amateurs will tell you, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to hear the bad news. You 100% want to hear the bad news, because if you don't get it out fast enough, then it turns into a neurobiological event. But if you can get the bad news out early and you get the pressure off, it doesn't turn into a locked-in emotion. It just gets processed and gets passed on. As the leader, that's what you're doing. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the audience that you're talking about. So that's a one way of thinking of these templates is to, I have a template that says I'm going to back off and allow movement at the limit, a movement at the edge. And this is that alignment of forces. What I'm stepping into now is this next level, which is where I want to get to, and that is in this first half. In this first half, I've already said that this is the impulses from neurons. Remember, with 11 million bits per second is processing when it's in the neuron network. It's 50 bits per second over in the conscious mind. This follows the laws of energy. And when you look at it through the lens of how energy behaves, things start to make sense. Imagine being in a situation where you're leading change and you're using the traditional change management, which is after the fact is correct, not all of it, but some of it is after the fact is corrective, and then you're dealing with things as they pop up. It's like the whack-a-mole. Every time somebody pops up and has an outburst, that's dissipated energy. But imagine if you can ride that wave, that you keep them engaged, you keep them focused and engaged, and you move that process along so that they're on the edge. They've got that energy pumping. Now your energy is aligned, and you don't it's not just dissipated. Now multiply that by 10 people on a team, or 100 people in an organization, and you can see the power of understanding this. So it's not intuitive, but if you can first discern the difference between conscious versus subconscious chatter, and then you can start to see this as energy impulses through the network of neurons, and then you want to consider kinetic energy. So remember, energy cannot be destroyed or created. It can be transformed. And so when it dissipates, it's being transformed. You want to keep it contained inside the frame so it propels the organization forward, not getting dissipated. This may sound like a crazy conversation, but I would argue it's why a lot of leaders miss the mark, because they want things to be more cognitive. If I was having this conversation with coaches of a sports team, they're already doing it. They already get it. They know that they have to pay attention to the energy levels, right? If they have their team peak too soon, for example, then they've messed up. If they have their teams taking the energy, misdirected energy, and getting at each other's throats, they're cooked, right? They want to keep that energy in line, inside the frame, moving it forward, and they're constantly managing it. Leaders have to do the same thing. Public speakers already do it because they're managing the energy of the room. So they're already looking at it. They may not speak about it this way, but they know that they have to be preemptive when they start seeing attention drop. They've got to, that's the joke, every 8 minutes or whatever. They've got to be proactive to keep that energy right at that level. And as a speaker, when you've done it, as a speaker, you've kept that energy right at that level, that's a great speech, right? That's a great presentation. Versus, you get the highs and then the lows because you've lost them, and then people are drifting off to sleep. And I don't think that it means you're boring. It just means that maybe you peaked too soon and people are overwhelmed, and now they can't get themselves back on track because there's too many thoughts going on in their head. But when you manage it from an energy standpoint, you're paying attention to the signals. It's a lot here. I want to work that out a bit more, this idea of energy, applying energy to leadership and sales, and it's very clear to me, and part of it is because of the different kinds of things, the skiing and motor skiing and motorcycles and bicycles and car racing and teaching performance driving. It's easier for me to see some of the correlations. In fact, that's what actually happened. Is I was applying some of these things for motorcycle training, and then recognized how they apply. It's the same thing that applies, and one thing led to another, to another, to another, and I would tell you that's, I think, this is part of the breakthrough. And so now dynamic leadership, to bring it home, dynamic leadership is exactly what it says. It's dynamic. It's not that you're doing something new or that you've never done before. It's that you are reading the signals early and making adjustments before they're needed. It's much more dynamic. It's like dynamic suspension, dynamic lighting, dynamic, whatever it is. It's dynamic is closer to the moment of change, and ideally is preventive. It's predictive and preemptive, and that's where dynamic leadership comes in, because we want to keep that balance between autonomy and competence and relatedness. You go too far on the accountability and you lose some of the relatedness. You go too far on the relatedness and you're missing out on the accountability. So we've got to stay right on that edge. We've got to be able to keep that edge going, which is why I talk about performance plans for 90 days. Or right off the bat, for a new employee, they should have a performance plan that goes for at least 90 days. And then as that 90-day performance plan wraps up, based on what you've seen during that time, there's now a 6-month plan. This doesn't mean there's going to be touches every week or every day. For an executive, there might only be 1 or 2 touches for the entire 6-month period. And I say touches, meaning that, levels that they've got to achieve. Maybe it's dealing with a very difficult situation. Maybe for a leader, they have to be able to interact with the zoning departments in the government or whatever, or regulatory involvement. So whatever it is, you want to have 90-day and 6-month development programs going on, and that's where you can ride that energy wave. We're going to get into later, we'll get into the why allostasis comes into play. Again, when you're riding that energy wave, the brain senses increased demand and it produces more neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitter is great because, one, the serotonin, it helps with the mood, the dopamine is habit formation, but also dopamine is a signal amplifier. So when you're having that intensity that's coming with constant incremental improving demand but staying in flow, you get those benefits of additional neurotransmitter, which means more focus and engage, and on and on. I'll get into the step 4 next week, the response, but it starts here. And the second template that we talked about is organizing it into such a way that it's more useful. Now, to put this in perspective, I got this template idea from a book called The MacGyver Method. MacGyver's the same guy, or the author is the same guy who wrote the TV series MacGyver, where the main character is always coming up with cool, solutions on the fly using whatever gadgets were available. And the thing, he called it the MacGyver Method. He would give assignments to his subconscious, and he'd say, okay, I need a solution for this, and I want it by 7 o'clock tonight, and he would go off and do something different, and he'd come back at 7 o'clock, and the subconscious handed it off to him. So knowing what I know about the subconscious being the network of neurons and all that, I said, well, if it can do that 7 hours later, it's processing 11 millibits per second, why can't it do it instantaneously? So I did some testing and checking and looking at research as well. And yes, there is data that says, and that's why I call it a template, because that's what it's called in neuroscience. But yes, you can direct the subconscious to hand off to the conscious mind a clearly defined definition of the problem. And if you don't do that, it's going to use some template anyway. We're operating out of templates anyway. Why not use a template that makes sense? And that template that we're going to have is sort of a track out template. It's always preparing us for what's coming next. It's preemptive, it's preventive, and it's preparing us for whatever's coming next. And that template will show up at both of those places. It shows up at the pre-listening in the early phase, and it's going to show up at the handoff to the conscious mind. We want that template there as well. And that gives you context for why there's a pause. So the subconscious has a reaction time of a half second, right? But something was going on, during that time. The conscious mind has a reaction time, quarter of a second. And the subconscious has the conscious mind has a reaction time of a half second. But again, something was going on during the previous time. But we don't want the conscious mind to engage right away. We don't want the conscious mind to engage at 0. We want the conscious mind to engage at t, I'm making this part up, t plus 150 milliseconds. So what we're doing there, rather than engaging as soon as we're given the reaction, we're giving the subconscious a chance to craft it and formulate it into something we can understand and perceive, and also we can receive it. So that's that handoff that happens in here, and the template is I'll just keep using the clearly defined definition of the problem. Now I have something in the conscious mind I can run with, because step 4 is also where we make the decision, do I need to do some emotional modulation before I take action? And that's where we'll pick up next time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. Feel free to jump in on the stage as well, just by using that link that's on that's in the chat. There's your link there, studio.restream.io/ELA-MKPF-XYQ, but it's also in the chat, or comments, depending on what platform you're on. And we can have a conversation about this. But to me, this is foundational, because everything else I talk about you can find in books, but you're not going to find this anywhere, not that I know of. But it's such a huge lever that I think every leader needs to know. So this is going to become fundamental in the dynamic leadership as we move towards managing that balance of autonomy, relatedness, and confidence. All right. I will be back online, so I think Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week we'll go, and then I'll pick back up again at the beginning of the year, because I've got some travel coming up. Let's see, 22nd, 23rd. I'll do the 24th, assuming there's no issues, and then we'll pick back up with moving into transformation instead of anxiety. So this anxiety was to get back up to even keel, and now it's about how do we take this to the next level and break through. All right, we'll see you next time.